Safety Answering Point Manager Group. MAG staff will now take a roll call to ensure we have a quorum present for the meeting.
I'll go through the list of members. Please make sure you're unmuted and indicate if you're present when I call your name or your agency. Apache Junction PD. ASU PD.
ASU's here.
Avondale PD.
Avondale's here.
Buckeye PD.
Jim's here. Good morning.
Chandler PD.
Good morning.
DPS.
Patty Swim's in here for DPS. Thank you.
Fort McDowell. Gilbert PD.
Good morning.
Glendale PD.
Loretta's here.
Goodyear PD.
Goodyear's here.
Good morning. Luke Air Force Base. MCSO.
Good morning, present.
Thank you, Jim. Mesa Fire. Mesa PD.
Present.
Paradise Valley PD.
Good morning.
Peoria PD. Phoenix Fire.
Good morning.
And who is in for Nicole?
Jim Frazier.
Oh, there's Jim. Hi.
How are you?
Phoenix PD.
Here.
AMR Rural Metro. Salt River PD. Scottsdale PD.
Good morning. It's Karen.
And Casey.
Okay, and Casey, okay. Surprise PD.
Almost here.
Tempe PD.
Hi, Alicia Diaz here for Tempe.
Hi, Alicia. Tolleson PD. And Wickenburg PD.
Wickenburg's present.
Welcome. Is there any PSAP that I did not call that's present?
Salt River joined.
And that would be Dave Martin or
Correct, as usual.
welcome, Dave Martin. It appears that we have a full quorum. Melissa, if you want to proceed.
Okay, quorum is now present. The meeting of the MAG Public Safety Answering Point Manager Group is called to order. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. MAG staff, have we received any public comments?
Madam Chair, we have received no comments for this item or any other items.
Okay. Our next item is approval of the February 10th, 2022 meeting minutes. Does any member of the PSAP Manager Group have questions or comments on the minutes? All right, not hearing any. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Karen Sutherland, motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion from Karen Sutherland and can I get a second?
Loretta Hadlock, Glendale PD seconds.
Copy that. Loretta Hadlock seconds. Is there a discussion of the motion? MAG staff, would you please take a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through the list of members, agencies. Indicate how you vote when I call your name. Be sure that you are unmuted when you respond. Mike Folia. Avondale,
Aye.
Jim Tortora Buckeye,
Aye.
Michelle Potts Chandler PD,
Aye.
Kim Weber Gilbert PD, Loretta Hadlock Glendale PD,
Aye.
Shauna Henry Goodyear PD,
Aye.
Jim Stillwell MCSO,
Aye.
Kristen Molander Mesa PD,
Aye.
Heather Beckwith Paradise Valley PD,
Aye.
Dan McNamee Phoenix PD,
Aye.
Dave Martin Salt River PD,
Aye.
Karen Sutherland Scottsdale PD,
Aye.
Kamala Fennessy Surprise PD,
Aye.
Alicia Diaz Tempe PD,
Aye.
and Lieutenant Hadley Wickenburg.
Aye.
Is there anyone I did not call? Madam Chair, it appears that the motion has passed.
Okay, motion is passed. Next item will be the administrator report. 911 administrator will provide a report to the PSAP managers on activities and programs managed by Maricopa Region 911. Liz Graber, 911 administrator, will provide this report.
Thank you. So just a couple of things on the agenda today. Since we were at 43, we're at 43 launches year to date, and that's on par with what we've done the last couple of years. So we're staying at that high momentum, as it were. Our text to 911 continue to grow. We are, as of the end of March, 1,860 year to date. And so we see that grow incrementally every month. On SENS though, we are, just a note that we're going to, that eventually platform is going to be end of life. And so we'll have to start looking at a new platform of what we're going to use for an emergency notification, whether it's something that with the same vendor or if we do an RFP. For those of you that use it for your staff notification for your department, you'll need to start looking at a alternative as we get closer to that. And I only think a handful of you use it for Communicator NXT. I know Tempe's a heavy user, so Alicia, we can sit down with Tanya and Dell and talk about some alternatives for Tempe to start when this goes end of life, that they'll have some options.
Okay.
And that's basically all I had on my administrative report. Does anyone have any questions?
Liz, did you say when it's going to be discontinued?
They said that they'll stop supporting it and then it will be end of life. So we're looking at the end of the year the end of this year or the end of the fiscal year for 2023 to select a new platform.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. We can move on to the next item.
Sorry about that. My mouse was stuck. All right. This item is on the agenda for information only. Please contact Liz after the meeting if you have any questions regarding this report. Item number 5 is going to be the fiscal year 2023 budget review. Liz Graber will also provide this report.
Thank you. So we met with the state a couple of weeks ago to review our submittal for the fiscal year 2023. And I wanted to go over a few items of what was approved and what wasn't approved. You can go to the next slide, please. So the things that the state is not going to fund is, I'll go over all of them and then we'll go into detail on a couple that are impacting the PSAPs. So Sprint cost recovery, that's an easy one. Sprint no longer seeks cost recovery. We had it in there until we got the official word, and the state and Sprint have come to agreement that they won't pay for it. So that one saves us $600,000 a year. Of the PSAP request, there were a logging recorder reimbursement for Scottsdale was not approved. Also, additional 911 calls taking workstations for Goodyear and Gilbert were not approved, and we'll go over the formula of that in just a second. Salary and fringe adjustments that the city of Phoenix did for the MR 911 technical team were not approved. And no overtime for 911 maintenance is not going to be funded by the state. And then we'll talk in more detail on that one. So let's look at first at the additional call taking workstation formula that the state is proposing. And so this is a living document, so it could change as the call numbers change. If you go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this, if you can see it, is the what we were given to by the state. And what they did is they took a total, they did a MIS report of your 911 calls from September 1st to the end of December of 2021, and that represents your totals for each of them. Then there's a number of total funded consoles, and they factored that in. And then also they incorporated unfunded consoles. But just so you know, the state, in air, they made Apache Junction had one unfunded position, but they haven't added any, so that's not quite correct. And then they totaled all of those up and then came up with the average per position, which is, if you'll see over on the far right side, average of 1,942. So on the line that sits between Mesa Fire and Gilbert, that represents those that are eligible that have more than 1,942 average per position could request additional positions, and anything below that number. Now, it appears that this was, when they created it, it was sorted incorrectly, because some numbers, like, for example, surprise, you show an average of 2,218, so that actually would be eligible according to that. And also Tolleson PD and Apache Junction PD meet that criteria. But this is what they've set up with. And if we look at Gilbert, and Gilbert is at 1,776, and Goodyear, you are at 1,596. So they don't meet the threshold set by the state. We do have the state online, and Travis, have I missed any point on that, or would you like to comment on this formula?
Sure, yeah, I can comment. So from what we learned over the course of the last year, it seems like in the past, when people both inside Maricopa County and outside submitted for additional seats, there wasn't really a rhyme or reason as to why they were not approved. And so we wanted to try to use data to support approving and denying the additions of seats. And this is what we came up with that really just makes the most sense to us. It's not perfect. I know there's things in here that we wish we could factor in that we're not at this stage. This is really just the foundational idea of what we want to do going forward to make it fair in all the PSAPs across the state. So we have this document, and it's a living document. So we update it once a month when we get new data to support it. And the reason why we selected that September timeframe is because that's when the Rapid Deploy Eclipse package was upgraded. So it's the most accurate data that we have. That data is good with all the work that we've been doing with Rapid Deploy, and we'll speak on that after. But we felt like this was the most appropriate way to approve and deny seats, is just using that threshold. So we want to try to prioritize, the Phoenix PDs, the Mesa PDs, the Phoenix Fires, who we can justify that they genuinely need additional consoles based on their 911 call volume. And I know one of the questions that came up before was, why aren't we using administrative calls? And I just wanted to reiterate that in some of the smaller PSAPs around the state, they're literally serving in a multitude of roles, and they're taking calls for let's say their water department or their electrical department, and it is in no way safe, it's in no way public safety related. So that's why we want to use the 911 calls, just to kind of make it fair across the board, and it's a number that we can use. So I'm open to any feedback or ways that we can improve this. I did have a meeting with another PSAP manager here a little bit ago. They mentioned, trying to find a way to add in projections because of all the growth that's happening both in the Phoenix metro region and outside and in the entire state. And that's definitely something that we want to do and we want to look into. But if there's other ways that you feel like there could be improvements on this, we are very open to modifying it as needed.
Travis, this is Michelle. So I have a question. When we said we were going to prioritize Phoenix and Mesa, I know that they have higher call volume. Mesa put in a request for additional calls. I don't remember, or consoles. Did Phoenix put in a request for additional consoles?
No, the 3 PSAPs, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you, how you guys determine who gets approved on the budget for additional seats, and we can have that conversation. But the 3 PSAPs that requested additional seats in Maricopa County this year were Mesa PD, Goodyear PD, and who was the third?
Gilbert.
Gilbert PD, thank you. The Mesa PD seats were approved because the call volume validated it as being over average.
Okay, so what was the reason we were wanting to prioritize them?
Because they have higher call volume and less seats than the other PSAPs in the state.
For the ratio then?
Correct, the ratio, right? So at one of their seats, they're taking more calls than, say, a seat in your center.
Okay, so Karen, you were working on a formula, I remember. How far did we get on that?
We actually had a completed formula. I think that it was a lot to take in for the PSAP managers because it was pretty involved. I'm gonna unraise my hand here if I can, because I also had a couple of questions, but I can see us needing to come up with something that is easy to understand. The only concern that I have is that I'm worried that we are not taking into account a certain percentage, maybe 15%, 20% of consoles that are going to be down for repairs and training. And it concerns me a little bit that an agency might not be able to train new employees because they can't put enough consoles in to do that. So I would like to see in this ratio some sort of allotment for a certain percentage above that an agency could qualify for those other things that we do besides just have a body in the seat. That being said, to Michelle's point, we did have something that on the basis was a little bit similar to what you did, because it did end up with an average eventually. But we took it hour by hour to determine how many seats would be needed during busy hours. We cut out those one-offs. So, when the earthquake happens or something where the agency was just inundated with calls. And we reduced from that, and then we averaged out the calls that were left for each hour and determined how many workstations would be needed to manage the 911 calls during that hour. But we also took into account not just the consoles that would be in operation, but what percentage of time we could expect our staff to actually be able to answer those calls. So on the outside, we said that they could probably manage no more than 65 to 70% of their time being actually speaking on the phone, because they have to do other things that involve maps and calling people back and different things like that. And the calling people back doesn't show as a 911 call, but it's required on all the abandoned 911 calls. So we had to take things like that into account. And what a level of service would be that we could expect of our folks. And somewhere around the 65% mark was about as high as we thought that we could push them. And so when we did that, the numbers I think are probably going to end up being adjusted from yours. I'd be happy to sit down and share that with anybody that wants to take a look at it. We did share it with the PSAP managers. It takes a lot of effort on their part to get these hour by hour numbers. So I know it is a lot of work, but it could be something that we want to look at again.
Is there concerns, in looking at this, is there concerns that the PSAPs with the lower traffic are pretty much, well, because they're competing with the high number in the average with Phoenix and Mesa and the larger PSAPs, that they're pretty much out of the loop of getting an additional position unless all of a sudden there's a, I mean, even if they doubled, let's say Paradise Valley or ASU doubled their 911 volume, they still wouldn't meet the criteria. Is that a concern, or do you think that it's still a good ratio that they don't need to have a position probably most ever in looking at this method?
So Liz, go ahead, Travis.
Sorry, Michelle. So there absolutely could be, and I just want to reiterate, this is very fluid and we want to try to improve upon it. But just to counter that, if you look at Paradise Valley and then at the same time look at AJ, and as you mentioned, they didn't have the unfunded console. AJ's doing 3 times the work with the exact same amount of consoles. So I'm not sure then why, AJ wouldn't have asked for additional support at the exact same time. And I understand that each PSAP is different and there's operational components that are not the same in every PSAP. Same kind of conversation if you look at, Tempe and Glendale, exact same call volume, yet Glendale is doing the work with 8 less consoles. So are there some other inefficiencies that are taking place that are not quantifiable at the same time?
Well, Travis, a lot of it is that, I'm sorry, this is Loretta. A lot of it is that if you got to have the room to put that equipment as well. So that's the other part that some of us look at. And I know with my end, it's, we're still battling to try to get a larger room because of, we do want to add more positions. However, we can't do that if we don't have room for it.
That makes total sense. And I think just what we were trying to get at is we just didn't want this to be an arbitrary decision that we were just for no reason saying, okay, you get a seat, you don't get a seat. We wanted to at least find some way that we could incorporate data to make informed decisions.
Looking at the AJ, Travis, if you want to make a note of that, that one position, they actually have 4 funded positions. They've never asked for any, but it's 4. So they're up on 1.
Okay, thank you. We'll update that.
Any other discussions on this?
Liz, this is Michelle Chandler. So I think what would be an interesting exercise would be if we were to say fund this as this slide shows, to where it's equalized out. But then in the next round, what would that look at? The average would obviously be a little bit different. And then almost do a forecasting. And then I think it would be interesting to see what the numbers would show for, the medium and the small agencies moving forward. And then I think the secondary and tertiary after that would be service levels and how we're going to support that. But I think it would start to recalibrate when we're talking about the priorities being high call volume. And once we equalize it, I can see where, the math would start to stabilize. But then now we're starting to look at, we've almost probably added, 3, 4, 5 different PSAPs when the day is done. So I don't know how many iterations this would take to be able to support some of the, smaller agencies. But then how many consoles have we added to be able to stabilize this? So I think that would be an interesting exercise to say how many iterations would it take and forecast this out before we would get to some of the smaller agencies to to be able to add more consoles there, if that makes any sense.
Okay,
This is,
go ahead.
this is Damla, and I get what the state did with saying this only relates to the 911 calls, but I still don't know the value of that. Only looking at the 911 calls with the smaller agencies, somebody like Phoenix has more departments, more personnel that handle those non-emergency that we're talking about, but those non-emergencies still feed through these phone systems. And so it's still call volume that those PSAPs are handling. I don't know that that's necessarily reasonable to exclude that. I mean, was there more justification in excluding the non-emergency calls?
It really was, because when we tried to include the administrative calls, there's so many PSAPs in the smaller rural markets that are taking calls that don't have anything to do with public safety at all. So just the way to make it even across the board, comparing apples to apples, 911 was the way that we found the best way to do that.
This is Sean. I have a quick comment. Is there any way to differentiate that? Because non-emergency calls are still public safety calls in most agencies. We take all kinds of police, fire, and medical calls on the non-emergency line. So is there a way to differentiate somehow in the data those small agencies that are taking the calls that are not the water department or the city clerk or whatever they're answering? Can we somehow figure out how to do that? Then we can more accurately tabulate the actual public safety calls.
Something that we thought of, I mean, we could start looking at CFS and see the type of volume when you're inputting a call, because obviously those other calls would be handled in a different manner. They're still coming through on their administrative trunks, so that wasn't an option we looked at. Like I said, I'm open to trying to answer that question. I just don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Shauna, I don't recall, this is Loretta. I don't recall in Goodyear, do you guys have, if I remember right, you have your 911, do you have an actual line that's assigned to police non-emergency or administrative or whatever you might want to call it, even though we do get a lot of those, we do get 911 calls on non-emergency lines. I know that for a fact because when I worked both at Goodyear, Glendale, and then smaller agencies, I've had that issue. So does that identify? I can't remember. Do you guys have a separate number for non-emergency?
We do. We have a police non-emergency number, and then there's a couple of administrative lines. But public safety is more than just the 911 calls, because we take, a noise complaint, or hey, my car was broken into last night, or I came home from vacation, my house was broken into, on the non-emergency lines. Those are 100% public safety calls. So I think we need to figure out a way, and maybe calls for service is part of it. I don't know.
Right. And Travis, the other part is that a lot of times we request people to call the non-emergency line instead of the 911 line, because we don't want to tie up our trunks as well.
Right. I'm not invalidating that 100% we're taking emergency calls on our admin lines. I get that. And especially with everybody in Maricopa County, it's maybe not applicable for you as it is for some of the other agencies in the more rural parts of the state. I don't have this data, but I would maybe assume that everybody's taking probably roughly the same number of admin calls in percentage to their 911 calls. And adding admin back into this, it might just end up keeping that call seat ratio the same. If everybody's call volume, let's say 75% of your call volume is administrative, and we add all those numbers into the total calls, it's not going to change your ratio. The number will be identical.
Travis, Karen Sutherland again. What dates did you say that these 911 calls that you have up on this sheet represent?
This was from September to December. So I have a more up-to-date list that we just completed at the end of March, which I can share with everybody on this call if that will help. That'd probably be a lot more accurate, to be honest with you. It's a larger pool of data. So let me get that sent out here, and then we can look at those numbers as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ran a couple of these numbers, Travis, just so you know, on through the MIS and ECATs, and they were all off. None of them were accurate. Most of them, the majority of them show less 911 calls than what ECATs or the MIS package would show.
Yeah, we
With the
had discussed
exception
that.
of MCSO, and they go, actually MCSO went higher, which was ironic.
Yeah, Gerald's going to talk about that later. They track numbers in different ways, so the numbers are never going to be completely accurate. They're just different MIS platforms. But I could argue, and I think we will argue, that the data through Rapid Deploy is even more accurate because it has these different components that ECATS doesn't consider.
Well, I just ran it as pure play 911. There was no filters or anything on it, just 911. So. Okay, any other questions on this? If not, then can we move on to the next slide?
But this is Mike Benjamin. Was there any discussion about overtime?
We're getting there.
I'm not sure how. Okay, thank you.
We're getting there. Okay. So the other thing that was concerning, deeply concerning, is that the state has decided not to pay, that they should not fund overtime for the 911 tech team. This is something that is a change from what the state has done for the last 18 years. When talking to them in our meeting, they felt like that personnel was an administrative cost and not maintenance. So in looking, I put the two statutes up that have the information on it. One at the top is the ARS code that gives the different things of what the 911 office will do. And then the one below it is the admin code. So in the ARS, you see that where I've highlighted on bullet point 3, the monthly rate, this is what the state statute says it will pay for. Monthly reoccurring costs for emergency telecommunications services, including expenditures for capital, and that's your CPE and any hardware, maintenance and operation purposes. So when the state agreed to fund maintenance originally, that they felt like that was part of it. They did not consider it part of the administrative percentage that is talked about in bullet point number 2, the 1/3%, the 1.67, and how the state does that formula. But the maintenance was considered just maintenance. So, and then if we'll look at the state admin code that's specifically for 911, bullet point 3 says ongoing maintenance costs following the warranty period, which would mean does not exclude overtime for any premise information receiving and processing 911 calls and messages. And then you'll see bullet point 4 flips back to the administrative costs, where it's different things that I have is outside of maintenance that the PSAPs can use that for consulting, administrative costs not to exceed 3% of the deposit amount. That has more to do with the breakup. The state gets 3%, the PSAPs as a whole get 2%. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here's our options that we have before us. Is the 911 costs can be covered by member agency. So we would have to have each PSAP going to agreement that they would cover the cost of overtime for their PSAP. Option 2 is not to have any overtime, to work at, to do a 8 to 5 job. My guys wouldn't cry over that because, you know, that would mean they don't have to get woke up at 2 in the morning, but that's an option. And then we are setting up a meeting between the state and some members of the MAG and the MAG executive team to talk about 911 maintenance and why the change. One of the things we're going to struggle with is because we were just notified of this a few weeks ago, and to be able to have the agencies pay for it, it's going to take, as you know, getting into your budgets, getting the agreement set up with all the agencies to have them go into an IGA that sets up a billing process and how that works. So I don't know if we get that we can get that accomplished by July 1st. So it might be that we don't have overtime for a while, but these are the options we look at. And I just wanted to put it to the PSAP so you can discuss it and see, get your thoughts on what direction you would like to go.
Liz, it's Karen. I have some questions. When we consider the entire state and the managed services programs that are out throughout the state, how are those contracts written? Do we know?
They are written as a whole, as a service, as a vendor, so that when we'll say Tucson PD has a contract with Lumen to give, everything is under one price point. It's their maintenance, installation, equipment, and all of that is under one thing. So they don't itemize it out by overtime. This is what your overtime is going to be. This is what they don't have it done like that, like we do, because we're not a for-profit, but they're just like, here's a number for us to provide 911 services and equipment. Boom. Does that make sense?
Yes, there has to be some sort of similar to the slide that we saw earlier on how the state will determine how many consoles it will fund. If we broke down the contracts for the rest of the state, there's probably an average per console amount there too then, right? I'm sure we can break that down if we were to figure out how many consoles there are in the rest of the state outside of Maricopa County. There's probably an average that is being paid out per console. Do we know how we compare, I guess, in our per console costs with the rest of the state?
I don't have a breakdown of per console, but the state said that of the 911 budget, Maricopa region takes up 52% of what they collect every year.
Do we know, Travis, is our equipment 52% of the state?
In terms of the number of seats that are in Maricopa as opposed to outside of Maricopa?
Yes.
Give me 2 seconds and I'll do that math.
Oh, I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around, like if say that we are 52% of the entire state of Arizona, then it would make sense that our budget would be 52% of the entire state of Arizona. And maybe that is the case, I don't know. Certainly we are very heavily populated and more than likely do have a lot more positions than some of the other agencies. I also think that it should be per funded seat then. So those agencies that are at the 300 or lower mark as far as their calls into 911 probably should not be counted in this formula that I'm kind of asking about. And I guess my thought is that we're obviously no better or no worse than any other agency or console area. We should probably be on par with them.
Hey, Karen, 54.5% of the seats are in Maricopa County.
Okay.
Of the funded seats, sorry, just funded.
Okay, so that makes sense then. So then if we're getting 52% of the budget and have 54% of the seats, then there's not an overpayment then at that point, right? It's in line with how the entire state would expect to be paid.
So you're saying that with the overtime, we're on par?
Well, what I'm saying is that if we're contracting with these other outside vendors and 46% of the funded positions are being paid for by the outside vendors, then it would make sense that the other 54% of the budget would go to Maricopa County because that is the seat ratio for the state. What I heard was a validation But I'm wondering, are we charging the 52 or 54% and then asking for overtime on top of that? Or is that all the costs together?
So it's all the costs together, Karen. So our overtime budget is 30,000. And so it's not a huge amount, but it's the time we have. But I don't believe it's because they can't afford to pay us. I believe it's the philosophy that it's an administrative cost, and the statute in the state's mind doesn't it doesn't follow the statute as they read it. Travis, am I correct on that?
Yeah, so I'll just give my 2 cents. So payroll and fringe benefits, from our understanding, having ran this through our chain of command and our legal team, is an administrative cost. Per that statute, we're allowed to spend about $400,000 for the entire state in administrative costs, and MR911's payroll and fringe is $2.1 million annually. One of the differences that the managed service contracts site that is different from the Maricopa County contract is it is a price not to exceed for the managed service contract. So let's say we brought in Lumen in the Tucson example. Lumen could flood Tucson with 1,000 technicians and pay them tens of thousands of dollars in overtime, but the price not to exceed to the state would never change. Whereas if Maricopa County added additional technicians or asked for overtime, that price would continue to rise. And I did want to put out that we also denied overtime last year, and I'm not sure how that wasn't noticed, but this isn't the first time that we denied overtime.
Well, it wasn't brought up in our meeting for last year, or I would have jumped on it. So it wasn't, you might have denied it, but you didn't communicate that to us. But this is for this one. So basically what's happened is the state has stopped interpreting the statutes in one way and have now shifted it into another. So it's a philosophy shift that on how they are interpreting. If you can go back on the previous slide, David, thank you. So this is what they're interpreting, because we went through and looked at what it is that gives us guidance. And those are the slides those are the state statutes and codes that has to do specifically with maintenance and the administrative cost.
So unless I'm understanding this wrong, when a contract is written for managed services throughout the state, like Travis was saying, to not exceed a certain amount. And he kind of pointed this out. In fact, if Lumen hires 50% more technicians and they work, 50% more overtime, it's not going to cost the state anything. But it almost sounds like the contracts are not written the same for Maricopa County as they are for the rest of the state. I can understand the state's desire to have a certain number that they are going to be paying out. But maybe if that number is coming out, I think that we would still end up with about 52% of the budget, because we're at that 52 to 54% of the seats. I don't see that changing, but I can see the state's desire to cap it, and that at that point, agencies probably are going to need to help out toward MAG in order to cover the costs for the maintenance of our equipment.
That is something that we discussed, was a cap, Karen, potentially, saying, okay, here's X amount of dollars, how you spend them, whether maybe let's say that Liz has an open position. Could you then reallocate that payroll into overtime or raises for the other technicians who are having to pick up that slack? I think that is an option we could discuss as well.
So Travis, what you're proposing then is that, and Jim, I see that your hand's up, so let me toss this in and then I'll throw it to you, is that that the state would say, we'll just throw an average out, $10 million for you to run 911. However you guys do. So this for additional positions, for networking, for overtime for technicians. Is that what you're proposing?
No, I apologize. I was just speaking in terms of the payroll and the fringe.
So you'd set a cap, so you'd still,
I think that's what I heard Karen saying, and sorry if I misinterpreted that, Karen.
Karen?
Well, to clarify what I was saying is that I thought that maybe it should be written similarly to any other managed service where there's a certain amount of money. And similar to what you said, like at that point, you take that money and figure out how you're going to maintain the positions. MR911 then answers to all of us as far as how that money is spent. But if there's additional overtime costs and we hit the cap, that's the end of it. And then the departments are going to have to be prepared to pay into it.
All right, Jim, you had your hand up.
Yes, so I'll make a few comments and then I'll say a few additional things. But first, my first comment will be that the only having these technicians available from 8 to 5, to me, that's complete nonsense, and there's no way possible that can happen. We're public safety, and so as public safety, we provide 24/7 service, and problems don't occur just from 8 to 5. So technicians need to be available 24/7 to fix these problems when they arise. If it's something that's critical and needs to be handled right away. So to me, the not having them after hours is not an option. Furthermore, I'll say that we all set budgets and we all plan how to spend our monies, but we all know that things come up. And so when I'm creating a budget, I'm breaking things out by line items. And if 9 months into my fiscal year, I realize that one of my line items is depleted, I find a line item that has monies that I haven't spent, or that I haven't spent as much as I had expected. And I use maneuvers to move monies from one line to another. Why is that not being brought up as an option? When we work out a budget with the state, that agreed upon monies should be broken out by line items. And if we don't spend something that we thought we were going to spend and we have money left over, why can't we move it into that line that would fund overtime?
Can I respond to that real quick before you go to your other points? Is that it's not the state isn't saying that there's not enough money to pay overtime. It's saying that by statute they shouldn't be paying overtime. So I want to make sure everybody's really clear on that. It's not that we're short $30,000 and we can't pay your overtime. It's that we consider payroll and administrative costs, not maintenance cost, and so you've exceeded it, and so we're not paying your overtime.
And to take that one step further, we're not necessarily, I completely agree with what you said, Jim, about the 8 to 5 option is not an option. But another component of it is the fact that where the money is coming from. So all the PSAPs pay money to MAG monthly. 0% of that money goes towards MR911. MAG pays nothing. 100% of MR911 is funded through the state. MR911 Maricopa County is the only county that we are funding 100% of the services in. So it's more a means of, we feel like there's an opportunity for MAG to actually contribute something to the group. So the onus is not just on the state, which is the same expectation we have for every other county.
So just to clarify, the MAG does pay dues. They don't pay for anything with 911, but you guys all pay for all the things that go within your agency, personnel, all of that. The 911 funds that MAG pays into your member agencies pay in a percentage. They pay in a percentage for everything that MAG does. So MAG does transportation, all of the things that they have oversight in. Each of the city member agencies pay into that. And so part of that is 911, so that they have a contract with the city of Phoenix to manage 911 on behalf of all your agencies. And that's how your agencies, your city managers and mayors do the United Planning Fund, United Planning contract that they agree to every year. And part of that is 911. So they agree to it. And then the MAG on behalf of the member agency goes into contract with the city of Phoenix. And so the monies they do collect is to handle that management of that. It's not a huge amount that you're paying into 911. But so the 911 for everybody outside, they have the same basic stuff that they get reimbursed for. So the PSAPs outside of Maricopa region get telephone, they get maintenance, 24-hour maintenance, and those things are paid for by the state. They do pay for things that are like you do with your PSAPs, and they also pay for all of the out of scope requests that they have. So if you're moving or doing anything like that, that those are paid for by the PSAPs outside of the state region.
So when I look at this, I look at MR 911 on the same level as that I look at, say, Lumen for the Tucson area. So if the state's providing money to Lumen, well, to Tucson area to pay Lumen for their maintenance, and Lumen uses part of that money to pay their technicians overtime, to me, that would be no different in the Maricopa region, except that, we're getting it from MR 911 as opposed to Lumen. So however that contract is written for Lumen to allow them to pay their technicians overtime should be no different than how our contract is written to allow MR 911 to pay their technicians for overtime. If it's not written that way, then maybe that's what needs to be looked at so that it does get written that way. Because if they're paying Lumen techs for overtime and it's not considered administrative, how's that contract written that we can learn from as a region? And then my final point I'll make, and then I'll give the conversation back to the floor, is that, and Liz, no disrespect to you and your team, but if the issue becomes costs, is MR 911 the most cost-effective way? Do we look at something different? And I cede back to the floor.
No, and I appreciate that, Jim, and that's an absolute valid reason. What is the cost of what the maintenance is you're getting, and of what we provide? And don't forget, we're just talking about 911 maintenance. Managing call routing and all of that with the selector routers is a whole different thing, but this is just PSAP technicians coming out, maintenance. So Michelle, you had your hand up, I see next. And then I showed Polia and Shauna as well, but we'll go with Michelle.
Thanks. So one of the questions I had was, is it the best way to look at it on the per console support? So if we're looking at the 52%, 54%, from a risk management perspective, I'm not sure that that's an apples to apples comparison. So, if one of our consoles goes down, or if we have some kind of, catastrophic something or another, if that happens in Phoenix or if it happens in Mesa, if we're talking about, using the same philosophy of where our priorities are, that's going to be catastrophic here versus, Colorado City or something like that. And so I think that sheer numbers is probably not the sole lens that we should be looking at when we're making some of these decisions, because I think the risk factor is probably something that should be considered. And I think, the second piece, kind of what you guys were just talking about, Liz and Jim, when we're talking about service levels, I think there might be something that we can look at in terms of, I think Maricopa region has supported us on things that have just been, I guess we could just call it gracious. And so maybe we just outline the things that are just within scope, and those things that are outside of scope, we should just maybe say we're responsible for. And maybe, Jim, to your point, we create our own line items to say, moves are our responsibility, and we pay for those ourselves. So that would actually maybe shore up and maybe be more specific on what MR901 is going to be responsible for. And I think that would make us a little bit more fiscally prudent on this.
Okay, thank you. Folia?
I have a question, and maybe I missed it in the beginning in the explanation, but why all of a sudden is this now being interpreted this way versus how it's been for the last, as long as I've been here?
Oh, that's a good question. Travis?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So obviously our team is new to this iteration. So we just evaluate everything and what has been and what is going forward. And we felt like this was an area where we are wasting a significant amount of money. Going back to the point that Jim was making in emulating what, say, a Lumen contract would look like on the NG contract, that was a competitive bid. So for the rest of the state, we have options. And there are a lot of conversations regarding price points and negotiations around cutting prices. And that's not an option in the Maricopa region. It's just the price is what it is. And it is incredibly more expensive than it would be to go with a different vendor. And so we see those areas where we are wasting millions of dollars annually. And as we look at these projections and what we're spending in next generation 911, we do not have money to be wasting. So to expand upon that, we are the fiscal agents of this fund, and we're trying to find cost savings anywhere and everywhere that we can. We're looking at consolidating and closing PSAP throughout the state. We're looking at which vendors can provide us the best quality of service for a lower price. And this was one of the areas that we identified as an area that we didn't agree that spending the money in this way was in the best interest of the state.
I understand that response. To me, that seems like a power play to push someone towards us towards managed services. But also, I would say that it's important that we look at then the 911 overtime expenditures over the last however long Liz has the data to recognize, were those needed, and to get an accurate number of how often it was a true overtime situation, for lack of a better phrase. But thank you.
Shauna?
So my question is, does this discussion have any effect on the interpretation? Because Travis, you said it was your legal and your administration that came up with this decision. So us having this discussion and looking and talking about options, does that make any difference?
No,
And then, go ahead.
I apologize. I think I either misspoke or you misinterpreted it. We have brought this through our chain of command and advised them that this is the way we interpret it. And they agree that payroll and fringe benefits are administrative.
Okay. So I guess my question is, does our conversation change anything?
I definitely think it's a good conversation to have. I think that being transparent and making sure that all the PSEPs understand the reasoning why in our thought process is important. As Liz had mentioned, I believe that we're going to be meeting with MAG and probably their legal team and our legal team to come to a resolution on this manner. And whether it's in however they rule, that's what we'll be doing going forward. So I don't think it's something that we just can determine as my group or the group that is MR911. I think it's just going to take a lot more people getting involved to come to some type of resolution.
So on our end, do we just need to come up with a solution? Like Liz, you put 3 options together, and not having 24-hour service is not an option. Could we add something like your team working alternate schedules? So there's people who work night shift, it's their regular shift, it's not overtime until we can get this resolved.
I don't have that kind of a deep of a bench of technicians to be able to do alternative shifts, Shauna. So that would mean the daytime we wouldn't get people for daytime stuff. So it'd just be moving the problem around. It wouldn't be solving it by not having overtime.
That was all I had for questions.
Okay, and Eric, and I'm sorry, Mike Gurr. He raises.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Mike.
I just got some new headphones here, so I hope you can hear me just fine. I don't think I've met most of everyone here, but I just kind of want to introduce myself a little bit here. I assist with the budget side of things for the overall State 911 program. And I just kind of wanted to just throw something out there. And it's going to be outside of the statute here, and more along with what Jim was kind of talking about earlier with managing the budgets here. And this is just one thing I want to throw out there, just kind of an added layer to the state's argument on why we would deny this as well. So the idea that I want to throw out there is, when I look at from a budget perspective on spending in the past fiscal years here, MR901 has left funding on the table, has left a significant amount of funding on the table when it comes to personnel and with the overall budget here. And so that's just one other layer I think that will need to be just approached in future submissions between MR901 and the 911 program when asking for funding for personnel. One thing I would like to see in the future is just a little bit more detail to see if we can truly forecast what will be spent for personnel. So biggest example is in FY21, we had awarded MR901 a little over $1 million, and there was, I believe, $172,000 left on the table. And that has happened year over year. And I think we're kind of on track for this current fiscal year. So the only thing I kind of want to throw out there outside of the discussion on the statute is we would like to see at some point, you know, more detailed information on how we're budgeting for personnel, to see what kind of, I understand there's probably vacancy savings happening here, but we would like to understand more what MR901 is doing to fill these positions and how they plan on spending, and understanding it from just more of a budget perspective. That's all I kind of wanted to add to this.
So Mike, thank you for that. So when Travis is saying, you know, we're wasting money, I hate to think that anything that we're spending on is wasted money in MR911. You're saying that the budget, we over budgeted in areas and that money is being turned back. Is that what he's meaning by wasting?
So one way to interpret it too is we're bookmarking hundreds and thousands of dollars that could go towards reinvesting in rural Arizona, or for MR911 investing in better equipment for MR911. That's the thing I'm kind of seeing on my end here.
Over budgeting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. And we talked in our meeting, for those, the rest of you, that we would get what the city is budgeting. And we do have vacancies, and that is a big factor on it. But we will get a closer, because that helps. If we can get a closer realistic of what we're doing, then, and prorating vacancies, that will help the state to know that this is a closer to what we're going to be spending. So I agree with that. Was there anything else from, go ahead.
No, that's everything I had. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Mike, for that insight. Any other PSAP members want to discuss on maintenance overtime?
This is Mike Benjamin. I have a solicitation to managers out. This is a large group of people that manage a lot of people. What I just heard was that we're coming in under budget. Everyone on this call, I believe, has staff vacancies. We've just gone through COVID, hiring freezes, different things like that. So now I don't understand how we're expected to manage that. The other comment is $30,000 a year spent in overtime, and I believe we request each year something on the order of 50. That number wasn't $5,000 5 years ago, and we are pigs at the trough coming back to, bilk the state out of money for overtime. It seems like out of a $10 million budget, trying to squeeze $30,000 out of that has been consistent, and we have all the documentation. We report through the City of Phoenix processes as well as our own ticketing process. We can tell you down to the 15-minute intervals where that overtime is spent. Is this how managers of PSAPs, do you have to get to that level of oversight? And the question goes to Travis as well, in your group there at the state office, or maybe everybody's exempt there, I'm not sure, but it seems like we're getting squeezed on something, $30,000 that's been consistent year over year. For there's arguably no argument against the need for the overtime. The state administrative code and the state statutes for this doesn't say that the state should have their hands in this level of detail of management. Is there something we're doing wrong? Is there another approach that we should have on managing $30,000 of overtime for a critical public safety function that covers more than half of the state?
Michelle?
So I was going to actually back up, and Mike, I can speak to that in just a second, but backing up before, the statement of leaving money on the table, that was a pretty hot topic a couple years ago amongst the PSAP managers. And I know we actually got pretty fired up about that in a meeting at Phoenix Fire a couple years ago. And I guess what I'm still unclear about is, even in our budget here at the local level, we budget and then we do our best to be fiscally prudent and get the best deal, if you will, and not overspend. And then when we don't have the option to take that savings and put it somewhere else, I feel like this is being kind of used negatively against us. And so I guess I'm still unclear about what is the alternative if this is being viewed negatively, because we do our best to, forecast what it's going to cost. But then if we can't maybe move these, to line item, I mean, what is the alternative, or maybe what is the expectation on budgeting when, we're budgeting for systems or budgeting for line items, and then it's off a little bit because the alternative is actually worse. So what is that expectation, or what should we be doing? Because I think we would be in agreement that leaving money on the table is better than the alternative. So I guess that would maybe be a question to you, Mr. Gurr.
Yeah, I would view it negatively, especially with the amount of funds that have been left on the table. And it's not attacking the fact that you guys are saving money or anything like that. That's wonderful. But at MR911 as a whole, what opportunities could we have had to provide to MR911 to invest in MR911? What could we have done from the state program to fund equipment or things that MR911 truly needs as a whole? So we applaud you guys whenever you can, reduce costs and, provide us with enough funding to help you guys out to better MR911. So I don't think that leaving money on the table, and we could always, make amendments throughout the year and everything. I don't think we could ever, I don't think it's necessarily correct to say that we can't go mid-year and adjust the overall budget and provide funding elsewhere. I think we could absolutely do that. But I think the biggest thing is that we want to make sure that we're utilizing the funding. Again, applaud you for, saving us, saving MR911 funding and everything, but we want to use that money and help you guys out with more resources. I think that's the standpoint where we're coming from.
So Mike, you're a numbers guy. The $30,000 of savings that the state would get for the overtime, and then the $170,000 in the personnel costs. What percentage of our budget is that is trying to be managed at this very micro level?
It's about 9.6 for next year. Million.
So $200,000 is what percentage of 9.6 million?
So when we're talking about the numbers here, we also have to figure that we're trying to work in special projects as well for MR91. And I'm sorry if I'm not fully understanding your question there. But a lot of that, so first of all, what I'm looking at when it comes to personnel is that MR91 has not been spending in their personnel. And for example, we have an ask for the Phoenix PD project that's coming up next year around $2.5 million. So I'm looking at every single category to see what MR91 has historically spent and see what we can do to help provide those funds for these special projects that are in need. Sorry, did I answer your question there?
So
Well,
I guess
again, oh my God.
Hey, Mike, I'm gonna
The fact
jump
that
in.
we have a, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so I'm going to finish kind of backing up a little bit. So I guess my question would be, as you're looking at these, would maybe the answer be establishing a process throughout the year to continue to evaluate, be it quarterly or halfway through or something, so we're not leaving money on the table, or so we're using it the way it needs to go, or addressing priority projects. You know, if we don't have staff and we know we're not going to be able to fill a position, or if that project is done, we're recouping those costs and placing them elsewhere. Because I guess because this issue keeps resurfacing, I feel like we need to put it to bed and create a solution.
And we did discuss that, Michelle, when Mike and I met with Liz and Christine, of doing those quarterly, if not, every 6-month meetings to reevaluate the budget and get it more in line with what we think the projections are going to be.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to maybe what Mike is talking about as well. Is Mike, we definitely see the process in the ticketing system. So from the PSAP manager perspective, I can't speak for anybody else, but there's definitely no question from our side where the time is going, because there's definitely a template on how you guys are spending your overtime, what it's addressing on the ticket. And so from my perspective, we know the ticket number, we know what the issue is, we know who responded, we know the time that it took. So from that process perspective, it is definitely being addressed. So I think we're also all in agreement that a 24/7 operation requires 24/7 response. So I think the next step on this is the how, and then what we're going to be doing in the interim, because if this is a now issue, we're going to need an interim solution. And obviously nothing can change right now because we need the 24/7 support. So I guess that's my question to you, Liz, is what can we expect moving forward?
That's a good question. I wish I had an answer for you. I appreciate what Mike Gurr brought up, and that is a thing. And yes, we had agreed to it. And we used to sit down with the state and review everything on every other month basis, but that was with the former state. We haven't done it with this one. And so we would absolutely like to do that. We could get what the city projects on our personnel to help that, and all of the projections. And as things are fluid and this doesn't fall out, or if we have a vacancy that we haven't been able to fill, that those monies we can prorate it on what can be put back and what can be reallocated. But I don't want to have it so that when I do get the position filled, well, you've already spent the money. There's that balance, but having those meetings with the state would absolutely help in that. And I think that's a good suggestion. But what I feel bad is that this wasn't communicated to us at all until the end of March. This should have been brought up sooner so we could start a planning and say, hey, can you do this? I don't know if denying to pay for overtime was the best way to approach the fact that we need you to be, to change how you budget or to communicate. That would have been much better than we're not able to fund your overtime because of this, instead of saying, hey, let's work together on it. So I like that idea of doing that. But now that the meetings that we'll sit down with MAG and with Travis and his chain of command and talk about what it is we can go to reiterate basically what we're saying, what you're saying. So to discuss that in that meeting and come up with a solution, but I can't tell you at this point what that's going to be. So I know not much help, but if we will have to think of contingency. Once that meeting happens, then we'll know, all right, we're going to have to figure out maintenance until we can get something in place to pay for it, or the state says, yes, we'll continue to fund maintenance. Those are basically the two options that we're looking at now on. And I agree that 24-hour maintenance is needed for 911. It's unrealistic to think that that is not, but I also know that I can't send technicians out to do work unless I have a source to pay for the overtime. And that's just what has to be decided. So have we beat 911 maintenance up to death, or does anyone have anything else you want to add? Okay, Damala, are you there?
I am here, thank you. All right, next item. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion only, and I assume there'll be more discussion forthcoming with that. Next topic is NG 911 Core Service Project, and Liz Gerber will also lead this discussion.
Thanks, and I'll give you my part, and then Karen Sutherland, who's our Core Services Chair, can add any thoughts from her side. But we were contacted by the vendor Comtech for the project of putting us on the new platform, and they are, as many of us are, suffering from supply chain issues, and the equipment they need to get for our new equipment for our network centers is not available until September. So we're looking at a September cutover. It's probably before September, but they asked about pushing our upgrade to a September timeframe. And talking to our Mike Benjamin and his team, we felt like that that would be a better solution to go ahead and delay it and prepare it so that we have the new equipment in place when we make the cutover, and not to do it on old equipment and then have to do it again on new equipment. That would torture the PSAPs twice. So that is what my input is. Karen, do you have anything beyond that?
I don't have a lot. I do want to just remind the managers to really consider, if you're not sure what this core services project is, if that's still pretty unclear to you, to reach out to me or Liz, because one of the things that we really need to get together as a group and talk about are the different types of scenarios in what we would do, and not just for our own agency either. So, you know, I might be able to put together a thought process on what happens if Scottsdale has a power failure tomorrow, or our phones drop tomorrow, or our building catches on fire. But if we have something really big, say it's a weather emergency that affects several agencies, we might no longer be able to do our contingency plan. I might not be able to transfer calls to Chandler or Tempe because Chandler and Tempe are under the same emergency that I am. And if it's big enough, we might not be able to choose any of the agencies that we would normally choose. And we might have to be looking outside of Maricopa County for assistance with our phone calls. So those are the types of conversations that really need to be taking place over the next few months, so that when all of this gets implemented, we can say that we have that continuity of operations plan for anything that could happen here, and that we have at least considered who could help us so that we can put that into action fast. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing that I wanted to say was that we did have a meeting scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon. But because of the equipment supply and everything being pushed back and there not really being any more updates at this time, we've canceled this afternoon's meeting. We figure nobody is going to be heartbroken to have one meeting taken off of their calendar. So we canceled today's. The next one is in 2 weeks.
Any other questions for Karen and I on core services? Okay, Damala, it's yours.
Okay, that item is on the agenda for information and discussion only. Next topic is going to be Arizona 911 Office Report. This is report on 911 throughout the state of Arizona. Travis Jensen, Program Manager of the State 911 Office, will be providing this report.
And if you could go to the next slide, it has it. There you go.
Okay, so a couple items came up that Liz and her team requested that we discuss, and then there's a couple things on here that we wanted to advise on. So I think this is worded a little poorly. It's not necessarily that we're looking to fund only one mapping platform. I think we're looking to identify what is the best mapping platform in every single region. So as we're going forward with the CHE upgrades, I think we've communicated that we've broken it down into 4 phases. In the first 2 phases, all the selections have been made. All of those PSAPs, for the most part, are going forward with Vesta, and we'll be implementing the Vesta Map Local as their mapping solution with a rapid SOS integration component into the CHE. I know there's been some conversation around the Maricopa region regarding what type of map is best for you. Is it the current day MR901 map? Is it that Vesta Map Local if you go with Vesta with a rapid SOS integration? We met with Rapid SOS with their premium product that's also coming out. They will have a standalone CHE map that could be a replacement for that map as well. And then in our conversations with Rapid Deploy, they also have the standalone advanced map, enhanced map, what they call it, that would be an option as well. So I think it's really looking at the resources that MR911 has to continue to support that mapping platform, and then what mapping platform all of you think will be the best one. And in terms of the resources, I want to kick this conversation over to Eric, our GIS manager, because we got the results back from the MR901 Gap Assessment, and I think it identified a lot of opportunities and ways that we could make some improvements, or that MR901 could make some improvements in some workflows. So Eric, if you can jump on and grab that portion, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Travis. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Travis alluded to, our statewide gap assessment was completed March 31st of this year that looked at every 911 system across the state as well as the state as a whole. One of the findings that we did when we had a series of interviews with MR901 was that, from a workflow standpoint, we are seeing some concerns as we transition to next gen. The date is quickly approaching for the region. So one of the things that was brought to the table was that data as it currently stands today doesn't meet the NENA I3 standards. When we do a comparison with neighboring counties, looking at Gila, Pinal, Yuma, Yavapai, they've been making some significant progression and strides of meeting that requirement as far as integrating that data so it meets the requirements for the ECRF and LVF. So one of the documents in the gap assessment that is noted, and I notice I can't paste it in the chat as far as the document, I'll do a follow-up with that, but was to look at other solutions, specifically commercial off-the-shelf solutions that provide the mapping flexibility that you would need for a 911 center, like Travis alluded to, looking at Vesta Map Local and the integrations that they have both with Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy as a possibility. And I think ultimately what this does is it frees up resources that act as the GIS data steward for Maricopa County to focus on making sure that the data meets that level of conformance and make sure that the county as a whole has the ability to spatially route calls. And like I said, we're quickly approaching and getting that data consistency and reliability synchronized. That's one of the things we're really pushing forward to. And that's what the gap assessment captures, and it goes into the details of that. One of the other things is, and I'll just talk on it briefly, is the dependency with Phoenix Fire and the data that they curate. That data does not meet the conformance for next gen that serves purposes for CAD. So that's another consideration that we're looking at from a workflow standpoint for areas of improvement as we move forward. So that
So
being
Eric,
said,
Eric, can you give us, so you're saying that our GIS is woefully behind on course NG 911 components being added?
yeah, that's correct. So when we're looking at the NINA data standard for GIS, the GIS data model, there are certain components that we are currently seeing as a lack when we're talking about MR911. And I can certainly provide those results to you in a different report. I've communicated that with Dave and his team. But those are some of the things that we're seeing as a continuation as possible lacks or gaps of the data as we transition into NG.
Okay, so yeah, because I'm finding that difficult to wrap my mind around, because we've been working on that data for a while, but Dave Eaton can speak to that. But the other thing is, I know you used to work over at GIS with Phoenix Fire, so you know that they are gathering for the CAD. They aren't doing our work. We take what they provide us, and then we put the 911 components into it. So they're not doing core services work. I mean, that they're doing what they use, but they share that data with us. So having Phoenix Fire, I guess I don't know the relevancy of that. If they're putting a new information in for us constantly and we're able to update it, I don't know how that's a waste of time.
The concern is, per NINA, with the 3-day business rule turnaround, if MR911 has a discrepancy that's found on the ECRF, that turnaround time going back to a local municipality for where they can provision the data, upload it to Phoenix Fire, and then Phoenix Fire can turn that round back to MR911. That's one of the concerns we see as far as a workflow when we're talking about efficiency.
Sorry, that's not the workflow. So it doesn't go all the way back to, local agencies for them to manage the data. It's managed at the Phoenix Fire data set. And so if there's any changes that would come through it, it's managed at that source, the Phoenix Fire data source. It doesn't go all the way back to the municipalities.
So as far as Phoenix Fire being able, or I guess MR911 working with Phoenix Fire to do that 3-day turnaround, what does that process look like? Because Phoenix Fire obviously doesn't have that as a requirement that they need to remediate their data. And we can have this conversation offline, Dave. I know we're running up on time.
Yeah, you know what, Eric, it sounds like it, because you've said you've met with Dave on this already.
Yeah, we provided the gap assessment to you.
Okay, yeah, I think it better, before we drag all the PSAPs in this, perhaps that meeting should happen between us before you give the report of what you believe our inefficiencies are.
Yeah, and yeah, it's captured in the assessment, and we could certainly
Okay, all right,
follow
well,
up that offline.
we'll put a pin in it, and we will visit with you guys offline on this.
So just to take this one step further, if those inefficiencies exist that MCP identified, that wasn't an assessment by our group, it was an assessment by a third-party vendor, then is there an opportunity to move towards a different mapping platform to have a better workflow around what is the capabilities of the platform and what is in the best interest of the PSAPs? So I know a couple PSAP managers have reached out to our office and expressed concerns. I'll just open the floor to any of them if they want to speak. They don't have to speak. We can move on to the next item. It's up to you guys.
Well, if there's PSAPs that have concerns about our map, I'm hoping it's not going to be a surprise to our team that they've shared that, and that they have felt like they could share about our map and what the pluses and minuses with the mapping platform. But I want to confirm with you, Travis, that you're wanting to fund only one mapping, so it can be the vendor map of the PSAP of their CPE equipment. It can be MR911 map, And it also could be, are you putting the rapid deploy, I forget what their map is, radius, are you throwing that into the mix as well? If you're just wanting to fund one map?
Yes, I don't care what the map is, but we obviously don't want these overflows of having multiple different maps. We talked about saving money. You know, if a PSAP was using all of these different kinds of maps, it would be a waste. So identifying just one map that they want to use, whether that's an individual PSAP or the region, just so we're not duplicating things and wasting money.
Okay, so maybe that's the discussion that we have is, do we want to have individual PSAP maps and what that is like? Do we want to stick with MR911 map? Do we want to switch over to rapid deploy radius? And so do we do it individually or do we do it as a region? And Karen Sutherland has her hand up.
I will make it brief. What comes to mind for me is that we have a lot of maps that we are using in each one of our agencies. Our dispatchers are looking at, in my agency at least, they're looking at rapid SOS because they have a lot of the supplemental information that's necessary. And as was noted before, their premium product is going to have a lot more features. Rapid deploy because we can open up layers and even look at local maps that maybe we've designed for us to have the WIMPO, or we may have a school blueprint map that we want to put in there. We use our CAD maps. We have a lot of maps. To me, I think it would be really beneficial if we could look at options of maps that might integrate together. I know that I want to be able to drop our blueprints of our, so blueprint might be the wrong word, but like an ArcGIS map of our schools with details of the classrooms and things like that. I want to be able to integrate those in with my 911 callers. What room are they calling from? Are they hiding in the bathroom? Are they running? Is there a group of them running in one direction where I might have a shooter following them? Can I bring it other things? If it integrates with my CAD, can I see my officers responding? Can I tell them that I've got a group running toward them? The more information that we could consolidate so that I don't have dispatchers looking at 3 different maps would be fabulous. I don't know if that product exists yet, but I would love to be engaged in conversations that do something like that.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm doing a comparison. Jim Stillwell?
Yes, so I will just second what Karen said. You know, we've got our radio map, our CAD map, our telephone map, our rapid SOS map, our rapid deploy map, way too many maps. You know, I think that, you know, you look at something like Google Maps has open API. A lot of software products are integrating Google Maps into their solution. So, you know, do we look at going to Google Maps? You know, you look at ArcGIS has a great mapping system. Do you look at moving to ArcGIS? I think that, like Karen said, moving to one mapping solution for all of our programs is the best result and solution here. But then I guess I would also question the fact that the state only wants to fund one mapping platform. My concern is what if I feel that Google Maps is the best, but somebody else feels that ArcGIS is the best versus somebody else? You know, we have a hard time in our own agencies when we're procuring a piece of software as to which company is the best provider of that solution. And now you're asking the entire state to come together and say which is the best, and what's the best for one may not be the best for the other.
No, that's not what we're asking, Jim. I apologize. You can have whatever map you want that's best for MCSO, and it could be a completely different map from every other map in MR911. We're not saying just a one statewide solution. We're just saying each PSAP having one map. You don't need 3 CHE maps.
But Travis, do you recognize that if as a region they decide to have one map, you'll honor that?
Yeah, if all of you want to continue to use the MR911 map, that's
I'm
fine.
just saying, whatever map, whatever solution they come up as a region, you'll honor
Yes.
that?
Yeah, I don't care what map it is. Literally, it could be Rapid SOS, Rapid Deploy, MR911. It could be Vesta Map Local. It could be, I don't even know what Viper's map is called. Whatever map.
Okay. So this sounds like, in PSAP managers, let me know your thoughts, that we need to maybe buy our working group on technology, I forget, our emerging 911 working group needs to get together and look at what are the comparisons for the different solutions of what we would want to do, and bring that up to the PSAPs to look at, and keep these discussion going on the map. Loretta.
The other thing that needs to be looked at is the needs for those departments. Karen has different needs. I have different needs. Michelle, we all have different needs within our divisions or within our agencies for different functions that go on within our cities. Karen, like she said, she has, Waste Management Open. We have, Super Bowl coming up. They have the Ostrich Festival. There's a lot of stuff that goes on within different agencies where those layers of maps would, if they're in one place, it'd be a lot easier for those dispatchers. Right now, we're overwhelming them with so much information too. There's information overload too.
Are you suggesting to put the CAD map and the phone map together?
Not me.
Oh, okay. Well, you say you have a lot of maps, so that's what I was like.
Well, I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that there's a lot of information. It's information overload for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, no, I understand completely. Michelle Potts, you have your hand raised.
So if we go to different maps, though, I think one thing that we lose is the current map is also a dashboard notification. So we have the emergency broadcast. When we did the protest, we could see all 911 calls across the entire region. So we do have some regional visibility when we're on one map, and I think that's a consideration. So some of what we have right now is just basically a dashboard. So I think that's one consideration, is it's not just a map right now, but it also has some other functionality that we might want to consider.
Jim, did you put your hand back up?
Yes, ma'am. In regards to your point, yes, I would suggest that we go to one map for telephone and CAD. But the reason I put my hand back up was I would also like to point out that I think that if we went to a commercial mapping solution, it would free up Dave and his team to work on, building those individual regional layers or items that we need, instead of having to worry about the core code of the map itself, because that would be basically offloaded to a commercial provider.
So you'd want us to design the things and then give it to the commercial provider?
Correct. So basically you would say purchase, or you would utilize Google Maps base mapping, and then we locally would put any local layers. We would Dave and his team would work on building out those local layers or things that we as a region needed or wanted to see.
Okay. All right. So maybe the answer to that is on our maintenance report, our technical report. Dave Eaton has some changes on the map that he wants to go over, so he can address that at that point for you, Jim. But does anybody have anything else before we have the state move on to MIS? Okay.
Okay, then the same conversation.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, that was, okay. Go ahead.
Then same conversation with an MIS platform. We've spoken about this quite a bit. Our predecessors made the decision to purchase Rapid Deploy's Eclipse package for MIS. It's been purchased. It exists in all of phase 1 and phase 2 on all of their quotes. Some of them asked for the Vesta data analytics package. Those were denied. It's duplicating a platform that does the exact same thing. So in terms of MIS, we're going to be funding one platform at this time. It is Eclipse, something that was already procured. So on all of the upgrades going forward, if you have ECATS, Best Analytics, Power MIS, whatever it is, those aren't going to be funded by the state anymore. It's just a duplication of a product that does the exact same thing.
So this one you've determined what MIS the whole state as a whole will do because of a purchase that was made by somebody else?
Well, you don't have to use it. If you don't want to use Eclipse, you don't have to use Eclipse. You can use whatever you want. It's just a matter of funding.
You'll only fund the one that you selected.
Yeah, and we can, obviously that contract will end at one point and we can come together and decide what's in the best interest of the state going forward.
Loretta, you got your hand up first.
Yeah, I did like Eclipse before my cutover because it was giving me information that I needed. I wish it would get fixed because I think it could be a valuable tool if it was working properly, but it still hasn't been fixed since my cutover, and I know we've been messaging back and forth, but I still don't have it fixed. What's the response on that? So, because I'm getting totally different numbers from ECATS and from Eclipse. So it's like,
Gerald, do you know more detail about the issue that she's having in Glendale? Is that something that's on the
I
rapid side?
just reached out to Ronnie, who's their new rep the other day, and she was going to follow up on your ticket because I was asking myself, Loretta, what's going on with Glendale? So I'll let you know as soon as I have some more. I got to talk to her later today about some other stuff.
right, because I've sent the data, I've sent
Yep.
everything that's been requested. I've sent it pretty promptly, even when I was on vacation. So that's where I'm getting a concern where I'm not getting that response back. The customer service is not stepping up to the plate for me.
Sure.
Michelle Potts, you have your hand up.
I was just wondering when that contract expires.
I think there's a little under 2 years left. I can get you an exact date. I don't have the contract in front of me right now.
You're right, Travis, 2 years.
So anybody that would do an upgrade in the next 2 years, if you're outside of that scope, it wouldn't affect you because whatever you procured has already been purchased.
Do we plan to do an RFP before that time, or what's the?
Yeah, I'm sure with some leeway, we'll call it 6 months, we'll go to RFP. We did meet with Rapid SOS a couple weeks ago. They're going to be offering a statewide MIS platform, and then obviously all the CHE providers have theirs. Rapid Deploy could still be an option pending whatever happens with them in the next couple of years. But absolutely, we'll go to RFP. We'll put together a group of people that can freely join that RFP throughout the state, and we'll go forward and procure something that everybody agrees on.
Okay, so I guess that would be my next thing that maybe you kind of alluded to, because I have concerns about the sustainability of that company. They just laid off half their company. They kind of folded on the CAD side and whatever else. So I just wanted to make sure we had a plan B, just because, when a company lays off half of their, staff and gets rid of their CAD system, I do worry that what's going to happen in 2 years.
I 100% agree with you. We actually met with their CEO on Monday, and I said the exact same thing to him, Michelle. 100% on the same page. I have concerns as well. I don't know why this product was procured. I don't think it's terrible. I think it has a lot of great opportunities, but hopefully you guys understand that procuring multiple different products that do the exact same thing. I think there's a common theme to everything that we discussed today. We are tight on money, and having this next gen come to life, we're doing these projections and it gets incredibly tight. I'm confident about an excise tax happening, but if it doesn't, we still have to prepare for the worst. And we're just trying to be fiscally responsible, not waste any more money than we have to.
So I guess my next question to that would be, so we have a plan B. I appreciate that. In the contract, then, to maybe Loretta's point, one of my issues historically has been, I know I've been very stubborn on this topic, is, my experience has been service levels and, not having great experience with that. So I guess Loretta, if she's having those issues, do we have something in the contract on a service level agreement? And is there some kind of exit that we have? I mean, on the CAD side, they had a 30-day shutdown with CAD. How do you shut down CAD in 30 days? It's beyond me. So do we have some kind of something in the contract?
Yeah, I know they've already given us some pretty significant price discounts for some of those initial issues based on not having that data accuracy report that they have present day. And I would have to check in the contract and get with our legal team whether there's force majeure that would allow us to get out of that contract due to some type of negligence or issue with the system. I haven't looked at that contract in a little bit, so I can't answer that right now, but I can follow up with that.
Or something with customer service, to Loretta's point. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
Is that a contract you can share with our group, Travis?
Yeah, of course. We can share anything with you guys. Everything that we do is open. So I'll see if I can get that contract out, and you guys are more than welcome to dig through it with any of your legal teams if you see something that we don't. Great.
And so has any of the ACD sites, have they fixed those times? Any of the PSAPs still struggle with their answer times being accurate?
Yeah, the ACD problem was resolved. That should be good, and your ring time standard should be accurate at this time.
Those were all rectified, as well as I sat down with Christine as well as Rapid Deploy, and we went through things. A lot of the issues that I see are people just aren't filtering properly. And so when we went over that stuff with Christine, she definitely saw the difference there, and our numbers pretty much matched. So that's what I've seen most likely on these things. The other thing is too, I have heard some complaints from some people about the product, but when we look at the product, those are people who have never even logged into the system. So I encourage you to at least log into it before you give some commentary on it so that we can actually get feedback and provide that to the vendor.
And just understand it's pulling data, and it has different data points there. It is eliminating duplicated records. It is eliminating what they're calling corrupted records that's coming through. And from what we can see with ECATS, it's not doing that. So it's never going to be 100% identical. But they also have the data accuracy score for each one of your PSEPs that shows how accurate that data is based on that information. If you're above 98%, I believe that's the point that we came into, then you should feel pretty confident that what you're seeing is accurate. And, I'm not sure how ECATS is even pulling some of those things. So I don't also want to sit here and say that ECATS is the baseline as the truth, because that's not the facts either.
Hey, Gerald and Travis, this is Patty from DPS. I just wanted to reiterate what I communicated to Gerald a few weeks ago, I think. We're using Eclipse pretty extensively for some of our data. The only problem we're having with it is does not give an employee hourly 911 answer time report. That Rich has been working with us to try to duplicate that, and it's just not possible. So I know he and his team are trying to put that report together. If you guys are able to do some kind of follow-up on that, I'm sure for most agencies, that's a pretty critical component, is to not only know how their center is doing in meeting 911 standards, but individual employees as well. And not being able to get that data out of there is a little frustrating, to say the least.
I
'Cause we're
appreciate
having
you
to go
following
back.
up and CCing me on that too, so that we can work together on that. And I'll follow up with Ronnie.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mike Foley, I'm sorry, I missed your hand.
That's all right. I have just a quick question. When would the MIS data go away then, if it's only going to fund one platform?
Travis.
I'm sorry, Mike. I don't think I understand the question.
So you mentioned the state's only going to fund one platform for MIS data. We currently use the MIS data that we've used for a long time. So I'm wondering when will we no longer be able to pull that data?
So when you do your upgrade, and I don't know when your next upgrade is in Avondale, part of the line items on your new contract show the opportunity as an option to purchase an MIS, whether that be third-party ECATS or say if you move to Vesta Analytics. And at that point, that price point wouldn't be funded.
Okay.
It's only a couple $1,000s based on what we're seeing on all the other contracts. So it's not an exorbitant amount of money.
And lastly, I would just echo the service level concerns as it pertains to rapid deploy. I've also heard the same thing that Michelle said and have serious concerns about that in general. So thank you.
So Travis, fiscal year 2023 is when you're implementing this?
Yeah, so we're going to have to do a review of whenever we finalize what we want to do with Phoenix PD. And then whenever you get that quote from Luke Air Force Base, if we can do a line by line breakdown with price points, then we can, it's the same thing that we're doing in every other PSAP throughout the state with with their new next gen. So we just want to keep it uniform.
Okay, so then that would be that unless Phoenix or Luke want to
Yeah.
fund their own MIS, they would have to do the rapid eclipse.
And I think we still have the questions about what platforms they're going to use. So as soon as you get those answers, let us know and we can meet and
Well,
debrief.
that's regardless though, no matter which one they go to.
Right, we still would need to see the quotes with the price points.
No, I know, but you're saying that they are going to have to go to rapid deploy eclipse for their MIS. Right, Travis? I know that we have to give you, they have to select their CP. We know that, but regardless of what they select, they will have to go to MIS if they want the state to pay for it with rapid eclipse.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And I've communicated that to Phoenix PD. I've not met with Luke Air Force Base at any time.
So I think this is go ahead with, you have, so that statewide 911 activity, you want to keep going on your list?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what you were referencing there.
Oh, I thought the report on outside activity. You don't have to
Oh, yeah.
go ahead to the next one.
That'll be the NG core service prospect. I'm going to kick it over to Gerald. He'll knock out the advisory board. We'll have Greg speak on the core service project upgrade, and then Eric will wrap up on spatial. But thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Just very briefly, we met in our meeting monthly, our state advisory board, getting input from a lot of people. Right now, we have been talking a lot about the excise tax and getting that increased. Mission Critical Partners has kind of worked extensively with this and has created a document to provide that we'll push out once it gets approved from the people at our end, with a lot of talking points and things for the excise tax increase. The other thing we're doing now is identifying all stakeholders. Sorry, I can't talk. All stakeholders that we need to speak with about it to see what we can do to get this pushed through. So we'll be meeting, more and more with agencies as we go forward, and we'll also provide input or actually provide information in our newsletter too that comes out each month. So that's all I have at this time.
Greg?
Okay. I'll make my comments brief since we are running behind on your schedule. Real quick, just a quick update for outside of MR901. Our first phase of PSAPs, 11 of them, mostly in AU and La Paz and Mojave County. They are on schedule. They're going to start here in June, assuming everything stays on target as it is right now in terms of the cutover. And our phase 2 PSAPs are right behind them. They also will have, as Travis said earlier, made their selections. And we are progressing with AT&T for their call handling of service. And phase 3, we moved up due to some of the things we've talked about today as far as data change, or data supply. Excuse me, I'm getting a phone call here and turn that off. As far as supply chains issues. So we started our kickoff with them last week, and they are now evaluating vendors or CHA vendors for based on their demonstrations, and also site visits to come. They are scheduled, phase 3 PSAPs are scheduled to be done by start in February and then in July of 2023. Phase 4 doesn't start until the summer when we kick off with them, and they'll be finished by October 2023. Maricopa region, Mike and Dave and the IT wizards are meeting with Comtech. I probably don't need to speak for them, but just a quick update. We're also involved in those meetings, working at the fine tuning with all the network engineering. And we hope to come together with Maricopa to devise a cutover schedule sometime for September of this year. Right now, September is completely open as far as Comtech's availability, and there won't be any conflicts with any other PSAPs in our state. So September is looking like a good time frame to do Maricopa, and I think we're working towards that right now. Everything should be completed as far as this next gen cutover by the end of 2023. Eric?
Okay, thanks, Greg. Finishing up, moving forward, one spatial, states have been, or counties have been starting to aggregate and apply validation mechanisms to the one spatial aggregate solution. This is a GIS-based tool that every county and locality has the availability to use to validate as well as aggregate their data set to a central repository, which then gets provisioned in the spatial interface. The uniqueness of this tool is it offers a series of change detections to automate the data aggregation and validation process. So pretty excited about that and getting counties involved and everyone synchronizing and standardizing their GIS data. So thank you.
Damala?
Okay, any final questions from anybody from the membership? All right, this item is also on the agenda, information and discussion only. Next topic is Maricopa Region 911 technical update. This item on the agenda for Maricopa Region 911 on technical updates and 911 system upgrade projects. Mike Benjamin and his technical team will provide us with the report.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Eaton for starters, and we'll try to move through this quickly. I know the meeting's going long, so Dave, you still available online there?
Yep. Let me see if I can get my screen over there. So can everybody see the map?
Yep.
Okay. So this is Phoenix PD's current map, and everybody's familiar with how we used to select base map layers with this switch base map. There's a update to the map that's coming out where this switch base map will go away. And this is a new version of the Phoenix PD map. So everything's going to be check boxes across the top. So this is all ArcGIS based. I believe that was mentioned previously about using ArcGIS or whatnot, but we have always had an Esri map, which is one of the base maps. This new version will include a OpenStreetMap layer, which it doesn't have specific address information, but it does have a lot of commonplace information. So you can see Circle K's, look like the Enterprise car rental right there. So it does have some addressing information. So that will be a toggleable layer. OpenStreetMap will be available for everybody. In addition, Phoenix PD has beat squads precincts. So if you guys have individual layers that you want added, we can certainly always do that. The only other thing that I was going to show was how, this is a med alert call here, is how the broadcast functionality will work. So messaging is going to be under the tools button. So you'll have a messaging button right here that Liz and I will be going out to chat with everybody about and how to use that. And it'll be implemented primarily just at a supervisor's position. But you have 125 characters to broadcast out messages. And I believe governance had been working on the rules on how that is handled. So this does track who launches it. So the IP address, the PSAP, and a timestamp. So anybody wanting to send out a happy birthday message, everybody is going to know who that was. Beyond that, we've already got rapid SOS information with device language coming in for everybody. The one thing that I am working on to hopefully deploy and beta testing is querying the rapid SOS portal. So instead of having to reference a completely different map, if the portal has additional information from all the different vendors that they currently have, whether it's SiriusXM or Cove, or I think Simply Safe might be one of their new vendors, that would just pop up as an additional window, similar to how the Med Alert data and the Uber data has looked previously. The only other thing that I was going to mention is Phoenix Fire had mentioned the town of Maricopa was blue, similar to Chandler, and they dispatched down there. So they asked for the town of Maricopa to be shaded differently. So as we migrate over to the next iteration of the map that has the new map features, you'll see the town of Maricopa is green now going forward. With that, I don't have any other further items unless you guys have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave. Talking about our staff, last meeting made the announcement we have 2 new staff members. So our 5 field techs, we're up to full strength on that, the hiring that we did during COVID here. And those 2 gentlemen, Jonathan and Marius, are getting indoctrinated and all the training and so forth that we can get them to, since training is difficult, off-site training and so forth during the end, hopefully, of the COVID stance. Nate in the project area has been super busy. On March 23rd, Fort McDowell cut over to a standalone Viper system. They were removed from the hosted Viper platform they were on previously. We were moving away from that platform because of the struggles that Entrado has had with the hosted Viper and updates and upgrades and so forth. That transition went smooth, with the exception of wireline. Lumen continues to work. They've been working since March 23rd to correct some issues in their network. Unfortunately, Fort McDowell is unable to make transfers on the wireline trunks, but they eventually, I guess I shouldn't say capitulated, but they accommodated the request to move those wireline calls into the Maricopa region wireless selective routers, where they have full transfer and conference capabilities on 911. So Fort McDowell's been trying to be as patient as they can with Lumen, going back and forth with that. Salt River, we continue to work with them as best we can, time permitting. They had self-funded a backup location in their tribal properties there. We're getting close, unfortunately not completely finished yet on that project, but tying their location on McKellips to a location on Indian School so they could operate out of either one or both for that self-funded project. Wickenburg, a new building for integrating dispatch into a new location that they had moved into further west in the town of Wickenburg. And later this summer, maybe towards the very end of summer, we'll be working to move their existing equipment over into their new facility. Gilbert is working on a remodel. It's right now in the design and planning stages. That will heat up and get into construction and so forth in the 2023 calendar year. Mesa, 3 self-funded call handling workstations, expanding there. Phoenix PD, you may have seen in the news, the city of Phoenix bought a high-rise building right next to the existing city hall in the downtown corridor there. So instead of 620 West Washington being their second dispatch facility, they're going to be moving into 100 West Washington. So just a few blocks down in this high-rise facility, they should have a much better view. Instead of the basement, they'll be up on probably something north of the 10th floor out of a 27th floor tall building. Still planning and design on how to integrate a large operation like that into this building. You'll hear it referred to as the old Wells Fargo building. They've moved to Chandler. They will be upgraded with their 911 equipment to coincide with that move. So we would not be able to move an operation that large from one site to another without serious potential negative impacts, but being able to do it to coincide with the new equipment, that should work out very well. Scottsdale is in the middle of the Vesta upgrade project. They're going from Viper standalone to Vesta standalone, very similar to what has recently been put into operation at City of Glendale. So that equipment has been rolling through. Nate's been working with the various teams, including Motorola and so forth, and early June is the go live expected for Scottsdale. And right on the heels of Scottsdale will be the Tempe move from previously hosted Viper into a standalone Vesta upgrade. Various parts of that hardware have been delivered, so we don't believe there'll be any supply chain issues as far as being able to get Tempe finished. So that the projects for the fiscal year, including Fort McDowell, Scottsdale, Tempe, were all able to be completed, at least as far as the hardware acquisition. Scottsdale again, beginning of June, and Tempe, beginning of August. Maintenance items, we continue to get, I don't know if I want to call it a barrage, but more than what we feel is desirable and workable for PSAPs, but we continue to get patches and fixes for Viper 7. Our Viper 7 sites, by and large, have been stabilized, but there are still enough pain points for PSAPs, and it varies. The pain points vary depending on size of PSAP. You get different issues depending on the size of the PSAP. We continue to try to work cooperatively with Entrado to get them to address all of these issues. I can't tell you that we're all up to date on patches, because the patches, before we're able to get them rolled out in a safe manner for individual PSAPs, we are presented with additional rounds of patches and fixes that are necessary. So Corey continues to juggle those patches and work with vendor to stay on top of those concerns. The other item, of course, it's been alluded to, a lot of coordination with, this is for our next gen core services, the functions that will replace our IP selective routers with the NINA compliant next gen core services pieces that will allow us the ability to be integrated throughout the state, and then eventually beyond for interstate 911 and so forth. Those items, bits and pieces of hardware are showing up, circuits, lots of design work, drawings, ton of firewall and security pieces. Pretty much constant motion, 5 or 6 days a week for my exempt guys. We don't tap into any of that $30,000 worth of overtime that we're sticking the state with for that, but we're trying to roll through as much as we can to stay in step with the needs of the next gen 911 core services project. That's the end of my report, unless there's any immediate questions that anybody would like me to try to field. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so the last one is my technical report, and your desktop on your Sense PC is going to change over they're going to start doing it after this meeting, PSAP by PSAP. You can go to the next slide. So the old one, you remember, it had MR901 and you had the drop down on SANS, and that's where you would do your launches. The new one is the desktop will show R91 PSAP portal, and it's giving you the selections there. The SANS is exactly the same, nothing that's changed. It's just the desktop on accessing it, but be looking for those changes as starting in the next few days. You'll see our team members out there getting them updated. And that is the end of my portion of the technical report. Damala?
Are there any questions from the membership?
Yeah, this is Jim Frazier. I have one. I apologize for just jumping in here, but I'm late for a city manager's meeting. Just a question for you, Liz, and whoever else could answer. What's the availability of getting smart transcription integrated into our Vesta?
That would have to be a sideline visit. We have Scottsdale interested in it. What we would look at is we'd meet and tell you what Phoenix Fire would need to do and how it would be displayed. We also have been trying to reach Motorola on understanding the technical needs of it, and we haven't been able to get the information we needed. So I can reach out to you and Nicole and Chief Gray, and we can go over what it is you're wanting it, and then what you would be responsible for, and how it would be implemented on the floor.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I've been appointed as the quality assurance administrator now, and that would be ideal for what I need to do. So we can sidebar that and see what we need to get that rolling. Thanks, Liz.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm
Liz,
gonna
this is
check
Loretta.
off.
I'm sorry I jumped in, but if you can also include me with Jim in that.
No, you get your own meeting, Loretta.
Well, just on the information.
Okay, yeah. We asked for a technical document and we just got a PowerPoint slide, so.
I can bring that up because we have meetings with Motorola every day.
Hang on a second,
We
Mike.
do, as of today, we do have a meeting scheduled with their folks. So we've asked for non-sales type technical meeting, and that has been coordinated. The invite went out today.
Good, good, perfect. All right, so, and Jim and Loretta. All right, Damala, it's all you.
All right, any final questions from the membership for the technical update? All right, also on the agenda for item and discussion only, any requests for future agenda items?
Donald, this is Karen from Scottsdale. I'm not sure if this would qualify, but I've attended a couple of meetings recently about this mutual link that is coming to Maricopa County. You familiar with this? Or should I continue? There's been grant money given to the state for all the school districts in the state to incorporate mutual link video into their schools and some way of reaching the 911 centers if there was a shooting. It's being managed by somebody at Maricopa County Sheriff, but if our managers have not started hearing about that, I don't know how those calls are coming in. I don't know if it's touching the 911 lines at any point, but I know that they're going to be reaching us somehow. So it's probably something we better be thinking about.
Karen, thank you for bringing that up. They invited some of us to the presentation, and I had the same questions you did on how it affected the 911, and they said that the only contact or the only integration is at this time is through it could be through your radio system, or it stands on an outside PC, but it does not send any voice or 911 related calls through the 911 system at all. So it would be strictly radio or just another PC sitting for your dispatchers to have.
Okay, so then I guess I'll leave it up to you if you want it on this, on if we should talk about this as PSAP managers. I know this is more for phones, but it's a new piece of equipment. It's not, it might affect our radios because it acts as a radio, but it's a completely new piece of equipment that doesn't fall into anything else. And I think that we should all get familiar with it.
Yeah. Do you guys still have TRWC, whatever, your radio meetings, Michelle?
RWC.
There we go. Do you guys still beat on those?
Yep.
There are UASI meetings, but they are more about the radio networks for RWC or TRWC. And again, Mutual Link isn't going to be on either one of those.
Well, I mean, that's what the pitch was, is that you can have it on there or you can have it as
Well,
an individual.
sort of. It connects to the school directly, and you have the ability to patch it with a radio channel that you already have, but it's not part of either one of those networks.
So I think that's because there's that possibility and it has to do with radio. That's where I would think that it needs to be discussed there.
Okay.
Okay, any other requests for future agenda items? All right, hearing none, are there any announcements from the membership?
I have a quick one. I promise our chair, Christine, is working outside the PSAP now. And so she was our chair with Mesa, Christine Pantoja Young. So Brittany Brunet, who is off on a family time, will be our new chair. And that means we're going to be soliciting for a vice chair. In the next day or so, you'll receive an email requesting nominations. We're going to keep a short window. So we're looking for those interested in serving in the vice chair to have those to me by the end of a week from Friday, a week from tomorrow. And then we can turn them into MAG so that they can make their selection. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are going to be doing a quick turnaround, but we are looking for vice chair nominations. So if you're interested, contact me and I can give you the details of exactly what you're going to need to submit. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Any other announcements? Okay, hearing none, the meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting of the MAG PSAP Manager Group will be on June 9th, 2022. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.